how do you distinguish between what you saw during the BLM riots, for example, and like the pure Antifa stuff? Because I realize Antifa was probably at the BLM stuff too, but like that, they're not entirely the same.
That's correct. And that line that you just drew right there was obviously muddied quite often during the actual unrest. And I think that did a disservice to the actual portrayal of what was really going on. It was the simple reality was that there would be, I think Portland is the best example. There would be 5,000 protesters out on a given night. They would come out right at sunset and they'd hear the speeches. And then there'd be about 500 people left over by midnight, smashing into the fence with the express intention of bringing the police out and then getting into confrontations with them in front of whatever cameras were rolling. And the other thing about Antifa that's different from the Proud Boys is that if you go up to somebody and you're like, hey, man, are you Antifa? They're not going to say yes. So and occasionally you see an Antifa flag, occasionally you see a little patch, but I call them the umbrella gang in the book because, you can tell who went out there with the expressed intention of agitating police because they bring umbrellas, they bring gas masks. The Portland chapter is called the Battle of the Leaf Blowers because they had leaf blowers to blow the tear gas. And then it was actually so successful that the DHS officers actually got their own leaf blowers. So our most viral video in Portland was these DHS officers basically on the other side of the fence aiming their leaf blowers at the I guess it's safe to call these guys rioters, aiming their leaf blowers at each other.
That is so annoying. Just the sound of the leaf blower would make me leave the protest, never mind if they were using it to blow tear gas at me. I mean, you and I have talked about this before, but you have been in grave danger at these events. This is, and obviously Kenosha would be the top example, I think, but you kept doing it. You kept going back in and back in and back in, and to the point where, Richie, now I look at you as a war correspondent. I don't think you've escaped unscathed from all of it. What do you think?
I would agree with that. And that's a lot of what the book tells is the personal side of the story, which is, I'm the middle of three boys, so I'm used to getting knocked around. I play ice hockey and I'm a surfer. So, I'm used to some degree of chaos. But in the midst of it, our mission was so simple. Just go to wherever this stuff is going down and show everybody what's happening. And I thought it was all going to stop after the election, but obviously that wasn't the case. I think Kenosha was obviously the most jarring example. And Joseph Rosenbaum, who was the first man killed, was shot right in front of me, and I actually carried him to the hospital. And I didn't know who that man was at the time that the shooting took place. So, the after action was, this guy did all these terrible things. He sexually assaulted minors, which he was convicted of, served time for. But what wasn't included was the fact that Joseph Rosenbaum was sexually abused by his stepfather, and the kids that he sexually abused, some of them are in jail for the same crimes. And that there's this intergenerational tragedy associated with not only like the general majority of people that are out there desperate enough to take to the streets, but also Kenosha specifically. Kyle Rittenhouse, absent father; Jacob Blake, absent father; Anthony Huber, who was the second man killed, absent father; and Gage Groskowitz, who had his bicep shot off, absent father as well. So there's, I think, a much deeper spiritual sickness in our country that is not addressed by, just these kind of surface level, Joe Biden is a poopy pants or Trump orange man bad. And so I wanted to delve deeper beneath the surface level whataboutism of the Trump era and just kind of show the audience not only my own personal struggles with what I experienced, but also the struggles of the people who were in the streets and were affected by these American tragedies.
I mean, you did not have an absentee father, and you write about losing him and being there with your brothers and his beautiful blue eyes and just coming to terms with his passing. You think about that in the context that you just offered it, of how lucky you were to have him. Gone too soon, but how lucky you were to have him. Otherwise, you would have been out in those streets potentially for a much different reason, Richie, given your natural courage and, that you're drawn to chaos as a reporter like a moth to a flame.
Absolutely. And that's why I included that anecdote. I told Shelby Talcott, my coworker, who was on the ground with Jorge Ventura as well for most of these riots. And I told her the day after the shooting, when Joseph Rosenbaum died, he had gray eyes, but I saw my dad's blue eyes when I replayed it in my mind. And the key distinction there is that when Joseph Rosenbaum passed away, I saw him, his eyes filled with regret and him going to a place that he did not want to go. Whereas with my dad, you know, he saw the nurse leave the room and decided that with his entire family around the bed, that that was his time uh, to go.
Mm-hmm. A friend of mine, I won't say who it is because I don't have his permission to share the story, but he told me about losing his dad and that he and his family, they were around him. And he was an elderly man when he passed, that he looked at the son, who our audience would know, and said, it's not so bad. And he said the son's name. It's not so bad. It's actually really not so bad. And it was the sweetest story because it's this dad on his way to the other side, even with his last few breaths, trying to make it better for his child, for the people who loved him. I'm just tearing up just thinking about it. Such a sweet gesture. And yet you've been right in the midst of people going out, do their own choices, no question, due to their own choices, but also their own circumstances, who exit under very different, you know, in a very different situation. And I think this is so interesting because every time we see one of these riots, we usually see a New York Post report after the fact, which I enjoy, showing who it was. You know, you see like, they've got blue hair, they've got weird gender things going on. They are almost always rich, 9 times out of 10 in these, you know, faux tests. You know, I don't know if they're the real riots where you get the rich ones, but they've all got like academic pedigrees that would match up with any cabinet level person seeing a job right now. And I wonder about that piece of it, Richie. Like, what's your experience? They mostly meet this other profile that you're talking about with like, or I don't know, I'll let you put it in your own words. What would you say is the average profile, the folks who are drawn to this?
Well, definitely if the BLM side versus the MAGA side, the BLM side is much younger. And I think it's everybody from the rich kids that you described to people who have nothing else out there. But I think the commonality between all of them is the fact that basically you had a media who was drumming up all of this anger and effectively, you know, the common factor, I actually talk a lot specifically in the Chaz about how the unifying factor was not necessarily, you know, Black Lives Matter per se, so much as if they wanted to get the crowd riled up, they wouldn't say all cops are bastards. They would say, do you guys like Donald Trump? And they'd say, F no. And so there was really like this never Trump aspect. And I think that transcended all class lines because culturally, you know, never Trumpism has become, I guess, half of America. And so I guess the answer to that question would be like, I usually wouldn't be asking these people like, hey, are you rich or are you poor? But I think a lot of these kids were, you know, living with their parents, living the ideal stereotype, living in their parents' basement. And they felt like they didn't have the same opportunities afforded to them that were afforded to their parents. And so I think that pervades across all the entire political spectrum where, you know, people feel like they're not better off than the previous generation. And I think that really, that ultimately is a class-based issue. And so when everything was focused on race and everything was focused on Orange Man Bad, we really lost the plot, which is black, white, brown, whatever. Everybody felt like they didn't have the opportunities that Americans once had.
I feel like those people are all voting for Donald Trump right now. I feel like most of the people you just listed probably went to the polls for Trump.
Absolutely. And that's why I knew that Trump was going to win in 2016 and why when 2024 came around and they rolled out Kamala Harris, I mean, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is like almost a direct, it was the exact same campaign that Hillary Clinton ran. And so Donald Trump, like him, you can say whatever you want about his personal whatever, but he ran on a platform as a change candidate. And that's what people wanted. And there was a reason why Bernie Sanders had such widespread support in 2016. And obviously the WikiLeaks emails showed that the Clinton campaign sandbagged him. And so I think you can only kick that can down the road for so long before people realize like, wait, are you really going to fix anything? And Kamala Harris being asked that question of, would you do anything differently when she was on The View? And her being like, as if she didn't expect that kind of question at all on the campaign trail.
There is
Saying,
nothing that comes to
I don't
mind.
know. I think so, But I did spend time at the border as well. And I think that was a key issue as well, where it
Mm-hmm.
was so in your face. I mean, you can only pull the veil over everybody's eyes until the issue becomes too big to ignore. And so you saw her pivot in terms of her policy saying, oh, we're going to secure the border, when for 3 years they were saying there's no problem here. I went to the border during Joe Biden's administration, and I saw people literally, where would they go? Well, they'd go in the gaps in the wall. So I'd fly the drone up and see the people coming in through the gaps in the wall. And I talked to literally hundreds of Border Patrol agents, and every single one said, yeah, a wall would definitely be a big help to fix this problem.
It's a no-brainer, and hopefully Trump will resume that when he takes office. The BLM riots were of particular note. I mean, those were so jarring to many of us just to see the level of anger post George Floyd, people saying the worst possible things about cops in a way that was just so untrue and unfair, and forcing people to raise their fists and say Black Lives Matter out in the streets, interrupting them at their outdoor dinner spots, which we were forced to eat at, right, during that time because of COVID. And it did, in fact, get violent. You're seeing some of that here. The clashes with the cops, by their nature, would be charged, given what they were protesting over. Was that unlike anything you'd been to? Like, describe how the BLM riots compared to the others.
Absolutely. It was. So I covered a fair amount of civil unrest during the Trump years, running the video for the Daily Caller, and there would be little skirmishes here and there. But really, the level of tribalism that I saw on the ground during that summer, I think a lot of it was supercharged by what you mentioned, which is everybody was forced by government mandate to stay at home. Businesses were shuttered, and people who didn't have, the opportunity to work remotely either lost their jobs or still had to go out there. But this whole government basically telling you, okay, you have to do this, put on a mask, sit down, shut up. And then finally, in May, everybody had been locked down for a couple of months. And I think that really just amplified the level of, I guess, pent up frustration that there was. And there's what I call like the Lord of the Flies effect, where if you go out there and you're protesting and you're out there with good intentions, all of a sudden somebody bumps into the police shields and they get pepper sprayed. You see that person get pepper sprayed, and then you get pepper sprayed, and a whole different part of your mind turns on. And it's really easy for people to sit at home and say, oh, I would have done this or I would have done that. But there really is a primal part of our modern brains that we kind of ignore exists. And when I was out there in those kind of violent situations, you see that turn on, and that's when things get really scary, because in those chaotic situations, it's always the one who's either the biggest and the strongest or the most well-armed who's going to prevail.
Mm-hmm. That's why most mothers say to their sons, do not go to that. You're not going out there. Sometimes it's a daughter too, but yeah, of course she did. That's what a normal mom would say to anybody, any son trying to put himself in the middle of that. Reminder to the audience I'm talking to, Richie McGinniss, and the name of the book is Riot Diet, One Man's Radical Ride Through America in Chaos. You can get it on Amazon. Grand Canyon University, a private Christian university in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, believes that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. GCU believes in equal opportunity and that the American dream starts with purpose. By honoring your career calling, you can impact your family, friends, and your community. Change the world for good by putting others before yourself. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's online, on-campus, and hybrid learning environments are designed to help you achieve your unique academic, personal, and professional goals. With over 340 academic programs, GCU meets you where you are and provides a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Let it flourish. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.